Oh, yes, we are live now. Thank you, Jawad. Hello, everybody. My name is Saskia Visser. I'm a program manager at Wageningen University and Research, and I'm program manager on circular and climate neutral food systems. And today we are here with a very interesting panel to talk about the role of food circularity in the system. And let's start with having the panel introducing themselves. Marianne, could you introduce yourself by saying your name, where you work for, but also what is your fascination about food, maybe in 2 to 3 lines?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Saskia, for the introduction. So I'm Marion Schupp. I'm working as Impact Investment Manager at Quadia, which is an impact investing company based in Switzerland, in Geneva. And it's been now 10 years we are investing in impactful companies contributing to a regenerative economy, especially in 3 sectors, in clean energy, sustainable foods, and what we call circular production and consumption models in Europe and in the US. My fascinations for food, I mean, it comes from eating for sure, but also that's something we all share, and that's why the impact of our food system is so huge, and I think that's why I'm fascinated about it, and that's why I want to be proactive to transform these systems.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next speaker. Just take the next in my screen, which is Jim Totti. Jim, could you tell me where you're from, and obviously also share with us your fascination about food?
Good. Thank you very much, Saskia, and thank you very much for the invite to participate on this panel today. I'm Jim Totti. I'm based in London at Viridis Capital, and I'm a private equity and venture capital investor in sustainable investment themes. I've been doing it for almost 20 years now. And what interests me with the food and agriculture space is just how fast growing it is in terms of investment opportunities. Very much grown to be one of the biggest themes in sustainable and impact investing over the last few years. And I think meeting the fundamental challenges of how we feed 10 billion people in a few decades' time, how we deal with constrained supply chains for a lot of the raw materials we need for agriculture, and how we deliver it into our cities and deal with the waste management. And all of these are very, very active investment themes and an area I spend a lot of time focusing on.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Curious to hear more about what you have to say about the food systems. Let's move on to Sasha. Sasha, can you tell us more about you, your company, and your fascination on foods?
Hi, my name is Sasha Babitsky. I'm a CEO of Entoprotec. We are calling ourselves a circular economy company. Basically, we are processing food waste with the help of black soldier fly, with the help of insects, and turning it into protein, fat, and various value-add products. And basically, this is a kind of answering the question about fascination with food, because we're dealing with the streams of food waste, so we're very much interested in learning a lot and dealing with food waste, where it created, how it flows, what are the processes it goes through. And in the same time, we are trying to answer the second challenge that Jim mentioned, how we're feeding 10 billion people, how we're creating a sort of alternative protein and various products that will enable all of us to eat well and to continue sort of with the good nutrition we're having today.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we move to the fourth speaker of this panel, Michael. You have managed to find a great solution for food waste and not having it in waste anymore. Can you explain a little bit more about this?
Yes, thank you, Saskia. Hi, everyone. My name is Mikael. I'm co-founder and CEO of Beyond the Materials. We are a young startup based in Copenhagen, And as Saskia said, we have developed a patented process with that we can turn food waste into a leather-like material. And we are currently focusing on using apple pulp, so all the waste from juice and cider production, as our base material. So this leads at the end that we have a truly sustainable leather alternative that consists of around 70% apple waste and 30% eco-friendly ingredients. And for us, it's really important that we're not adding any fossil fuels, so that we at the end have a product that is completely biodegradable, so we can put it back into the circular system. And at the end, it should be a product that is, of course, as good as leather is, so the same qualities. Leather is a really versatile material. So just to give you an idea where we are there, for a handbag, you have different requirements than for a car seat that has to last for 20 years, for example. We are currently in the development stage where our material has the same qualities that are needed for handbags, and we are developing more and more. And my fascination for food, I would more like it's my fascination for waste, which I share with the whole team that we have, is yeah, you can just create truly unbelievable things with waste. And I think we have a problem in society today that we see waste as a low or like a no valuable resource. And we want to change that and want to show that waste can actually be used to create high value products. So basically what we're doing is we want to show that waste is beautiful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It's interesting. It's also a real nice introduction, because I think one of the first points that we could discuss, we are kind of in agreement that we would like to go towards a circular food system. However, where are we currently in our current linear system? How far are we already making it more circular, and what could be the challenges and opportunities? Maybe Jim, can I ask you to start thinking about it from maybe the input perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Saskia. So yes, let's start from the supply end and the inputs. I mean, look, we still live in a very linear world. Let's look at fertilizer. Let's look at nitrogen and phosphate fertilizer. Phosphate fertilizer is a finite resource. I think a lot of people have significant concerns about how we can continue to supply the agriculture industry with phosphate over a 50-year time scale. Nitrogen fertilizer, of course, we use fossil fuels in ammonia synthesis. We use them not once, but twice in the Haber process. And I think that those are supply side resources that are going to become increasingly constrained, and the use of fossil fuels are going to become an increasing issue. And I'm seeing now on the investment side, increasing numbers of startup technologies and services businesses on phosphate, looking at recycling and recovery mainly. But on nitrogen, nitrogen fixing is becoming a big, interesting area for investors. Both chemical and biological pathways are being tried by many, many startups around the world. And I think sustainable nitrogen fixing is one of the most exciting areas. The ammonia market is over $100 billion a year market. So people are attacking these linear business models with more circular, sustainable solutions, but it's still very early days. I have to say the incumbent infrastructure is still very much the old linear supply chain. So I think still a lot of work to do there.
Yes, okay, thank you. So it's interesting to see there are a lot of startups, especially at the input side, of also moving on. I would like to hear a little bit from Marion what she sees happening in the larger value chain of food. Are there developments going on there to make the whole system more circular, or do you confirm the observation of Jim that the large vested companies are still strong moving on?
Yeah, I think we are like the main food system is strongly linear, but also very intermediated, with many different players across the value chain, from the farmers to the consumers. There are producers, wholesalers, manufacturers, retailers, many steps, many players, and and that's every time new sources of food loss and food waste. That's also where the food loss and waste is coming from, a very intermediated value chain. So yes, I think we are still mainly in a linear, intermediated and highly complex food value chain, and that's one of the point I think we need to change to go towards a more circular value chain. And that's definitely something many companies and startups are working on, to reduce this intermediation and reduce food loss at every step.
Okay. And then thank you very much. So we actually have here two companies who build a living out of food waste. I would like to give the word to Michael a little bit more, because we should avoid food waste to a certain extent, which means that we should try to eat as much food as possible as we can, but while producing and producing and processing foods, obviously side streams occur. Could you say something, Michael? What should be the first thing that we should address in this whole value chain of food, avoiding food waste, but making use of side streams?
Yeah, so I think we should start with seeing food waste as an untapped resource. So for example, like in juice production, like 1/4 of the apples just stays left behind as waste and goes just to animal feed. I think there we have to show, like, going back to that waste is something that is high valuable for us. So again, there we have to change the perspective on how we see waste, and it is also inevitable to produce waste at the end. But also at the same time, we have to, of course, work towards that we have in general less food waste, and I think we have discussed it during the whole day. I think that goes back to changing our diet to more a plant-based diet. And actually, there also, to give a number, in Denmark, 75% of the plants grown in Denmark are used for animal feed, and I think we should allocate that more to people and to feed people there. I think that would be just also, like, just a big start to bring us forward.
Okay, which is obviously a nice link to the work of Sasha. Sasha, what do you think about the possibility of having more insect-based proteins in our diets?
Well, to be honest, we are not raising the flag. We're in Protec. We're not raising the flag of people eating insects. It's not our war. Let's to put it like that. Some people, the products we're producing are perfectly suitable for human consumption, but we need to go through the yak factor and various prejudice, and we're not even trying. I mean, there is enough challenges in feeding livestock and animals. And according to all kind of papers and researches, we as humanity will need kind of to double the amount of protein we're producing by 2050. And this is the goal we're trying to contribute. But if I'm going back on the food waste, it's kind of treated problem from one side, but so far the focus was on how we are sort of dealing with environmental issues surrounding food waste. So it's well priced over most of Europe, and then you can't sort of landfill it anymore because of green gas emissions, etc. And now I think we reach this sort of certain level of development where we're saying, okay, we kind of know how to deal with environmental impacts of food waste. Now let's try to bring these resources back into the cycle of consumption. And if you're looking on the numbers of resources that were invested in food waste, the numbers are just stunning. So we're focusing on bringing it back, feeding it to animals, and then producing proteins that people are able to consume. And meat consumption is on the rise. All the charts are showing it. And basically, the challenge of how we're producing this meat, but still not damaging the environment and not clearing forests and not consuming water, etc., etc. And here, insects are providing, I think, fantastic opportunity, because they are You can rear, at least black soldier flies, the ones that we're dealing with, you can rear it without any water, without any pasture, on a very tiny sort of piece of land, and the cycle time is very short. So a single facility that we're planning is hosting biomass that is similar to, let's say, 200 cows, but with cycle time of 15 days. So it looks like a very good solution. We truly believe that this is the future of producing protein.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. I agree that insects are a very instrumental part to close cycles in food production, in the whole food production systems. And what I would like to dive in a little bit with you is what should our future food system look like? How do we design it? What are the challenges that we look at if we integrate, for instance, biodiversity issues, but also linking how do we link the producers and the consumers more directly? And then maybe what is the role of packaging, for instance? So how to eliminate food waste in this whole system? I would like to first give the word to Jim to think about, okay, what would be the conditions for such a food system? So when could we invest into a more circular system? And if you would want to react on whatever is one of them is saying, just raise your hand and then I will give you the word, such that we get more of a discussion amongst you instead of me intervening in the midst. So Jim.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Saskia. So, I mean, you were asking about the investment side, and I think, you know, I as an investor, I think about the capital markets a lot, wherever I invest in the capital markets food chain, because it is a food chain in its own right. And what we have to establish with a number of areas, and as Saskia in our preparation call, you were asking about biodiversity. We have to establish how these asset classes will be recognized by investors and understood by investors. And if we can get that in the ground and examples of investments made, then we can get capital flows to come into areas like circular economy, like biodiversity, and some of the investment examples that we've already talked about. And I think biodiversity is a good example where I think for a lot of investors, at the moment is a concept they don't really get their heads around as to how could be an investable asset class. I think it's hard to see who the stakeholders might be, who would supply the cash flows that then allow you to create financial instruments that can be financed. But I think actually before we give it up and say it's too difficult, we should recognize that it's only 10 years since people thought that offshore wind wasn't financeable. You know, people thought that turbines would blow over and the fish would eat them and the salt would dissolve them and ships would drive into them, and any number of reasons why offshore wind wasn't possible. And of course, in the last 10 years, we've proven that offshore wind is not just possible, but is now an enormous mainstream asset class. And I think when you look at biodiversity, you have to now think about how we make it happen. And I think government funding will have a part to play. You know, we saw with offshore wind how organisations like the Green Investment Bank in the UK played a big part. And I think there's national and international funding organisations have a big role to play in getting some initial investments done, proving out the cash flows and making that work. And I think by setting up some initial projects and proving it to the capital markets, then the big capital inflows will follow. And I think we could pick, I've picked the example of biodiversity, but I mean, there's a number of areas in the circular economy which are probably in a similar position at the moment. And what we've got to do is get some initial investments done, prove over perhaps a 5-year period how the cash flows can be thrown off those investments. And then the big international institutional investors will turn up in the same way they did in renewable energy. So I think now it's the case of getting some initial projects funded, proving the examples, and then over the next 5 or 10 years, we can replicate that and make it more cookie cutter and get the seriously big inflows of capital into the sector.
Okay, I think I could provide you with some examples of nature inclusive food production, reducing the number of pesticides, etc., etc. But I would like to also give the word to Marion and maybe also later to Michael about if we start thinking about the scale of our future food production systems.
Mm-hmm.
Marion, maybe you could say something about this.
Yeah, I wanted to also explain how we assess investment opportunity in this food value chain. As I said at the beginning during my presentation, I was saying Quadia is investing in regenerative economy, in companies contributing to build this regenerative economy, and we define it as circular, but also local, collaborative, functional, and biomimetic. And I think that all these elements will enable to transform the current food systems into something more sustainable in the future. That's why we look at companies that have in their business model the potential to contribute to this multi-dimensional regenerative economy, and I really think the future of foods is also in local systems, or in our global world, but local systems contributing to the development of local communities, and connecting the players of these local communities, especially connecting producers and consumers, and that will also enable to have less intermediated value chain and generate less food loss at every step. So we are looking at new business models integrating these 5 aspects of the regenerative economy and promoting local production and direct connection with consumers, while offering high quality food products. That's also, I think, a very important aspect we have to look at and invest in. So I think there are business models combining these aspects and contributing to a more regenerative future of food systems, and working to implement it and scale them at large scale to really transform the entire value chain.
Okay, thank you. So, Michael, how would you react upon that? Because you had, in our preparation talk, you had some vision or some idea about the locality of products.
Yes, so I would like to add also to, when it comes to money, I think it could be fairly easy, kind of. So the EU is in the next 7 years will spend 380 billion euros to the CRA system, agri-food, and then this food or the subsidies are not demanding like that you have to change how you produce food. It's just you get more subsidies when you have a big farm, like how many square meters you have, and it's not allocated to people who really try to become more circular or produce, like sustainable foods for us. And I don't get rewarded if I try to do something good for all of us, for society. So that's my thought there. And there to the seasonal, yeah, I think we kind of lost and forgot that, food is actually should be produced seasonal. Like we talked about it at the preparation. I don't understand why we should eat strawberries in the winter in Denmark, for example. We don't need to import those. We can use what we have in the country. And that also will help us to get more circular, to make us understand actually how food is produced, how much effort this actually is to produce food. And then also to Marianne, local food production is very important. Connect the local farmer with the consumer so they understand how much work it takes to produce food actually, and get the respect back to our food. And then also that will also create less waste, I believe in. yeah. So I guess is that it's a big vision. It's a little bit maybe young nativity in it, but I believe in it, and I think it's one of our futures.
Well, I think it's important vision to think about the role of locality, local food production in our food systems. But should we forget about drinking coffee in Northwestern Europe?
Yeah, that's not. I also would not go that far. Of course, I love coffee. That's a side note. But we have to see what is possible. We have to start somewhere. I mean, again, back to the strawberry example, or like when you look in Spain, you have these huge greenhouses everywhere. This country, a whole area is turning into a desert because we want to have tomatoes in winter. It just doesn't make much sense to me. Okay. But yeah.
And so, actually, it doesn't make sense to our bodies neither. Our bodies are not made to eat tomatoes or strawberries in winter. So that's also something that should be said, and we should all be aware of this.
Yeah. So I got a question from the audience, and they say that the question is, what role does food transparency and knowledge of transfer play on the road towards a more circular economy? Maybe Sasha, could you elaborate on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Saskia. With pleasure. It's exactly the point I was planning to make. The more sophistication, let's put it like that, the better we're becoming at extracting economic value out of waste and using to a full extent and harnessing these food waste streams and creating something out of them, it will add sophistication and transparency and knowledge to the management of streams of food waste and food. So, for example, on the front end in food industry today, there are pretty sophisticated supply chains and a lot of knowledge and brains going into producing and moving products around. And we believe that the same will appear on with the food waste. So the more economic value is there, the more effort, the more companies will be dealing in creating sophisticated supply chains, dealing with it, learning about streams, learning how to separate them and how to sort of to use them in a more efficient manner, and obviously contributing by this to circularity of the economy. So many answers to the questions that Michael raised are basically, I think, in the market, and the market mechanisms will play a big role in resolving it. Yeah. Let's put it like that.
So I agree with you on the important role of the market mechanisms, and there is always has to be the first one to make the big movement towards a change, towards this change. And like Jim was telling, we already have a lot of startups making some good initiatives towards more sustainable input supply, for instance, for agricultural production. I have seen one bank, the Rabobank in the Netherlands, making the first steps towards statements against the maximum export. Also, how many kilometers for certain supply goods, certain foods could go, and they say, okay, there is a part that could go 800 kilometers, and there are parts for like 1,000 kilometers or a world market, and there's also a differentiation for local food production. So, from an investor point of view, maybe Jim or Marion, how would you look like it to such a system from a banking perspective, maybe, or an investment perspective? Jim, Marion, either of you? Jim, you are muted.
I was actually asking if Marion wanted to go first, but I mean, look, I think we're seeing the banks increasingly able. I mean, Rabo obviously is a great example of a bank that's been financing agriculture for the best part of 100 years. But I think wider financial markets are starting to see the banking opportunities to finance these kind of projects. I mean, we're starting to see, I think, banks increasingly looking at the food and agriculture sector as financeable as they build out, as infrastructure is built out into that space. A lot of again, the Dutch leading the world in a lot of greenhouse technology, and the finance that has to go hand in hand with that as we move out into wider global markets. I mean, I think it's probably relevant just to touch on some of the issues that have come up this year in terms of food security concerns, and I think we were probably going to cover this a little bit later in the panel, but I'll just talk about it now in the context of the banks. I think, with a lot of agriculture commodities being relied on globally with just-in-time supply chains, and a lot of people have realized this year, of course, because of COVID, that they perhaps can't take for granted those just-in-time supply chains. We're now seeing people thinking about food security and local production, which again comes back to your export distance. How many kilometers do we really want food to move? And of course, financing that local production requires the banks to be fully up the learning curve in terms of agriculture, and particularly in terms of the risk profile you're exposing capital to. You're selling into spot markets with merchant type risks. Sometimes those are not the natural comfort zone for banks, and some of the projects with those kind of merchant offtakes, it's proper equity risk, which again isn't necessarily such a great fit for the banks. So then you have to think about how you change the equity risk characteristics perhaps to more debt risk and long-term offtake arrangements, or just proven offtake arrangements. Very analogous to how we were funding renewable energy projects a few years ago, where people were worried about merchant risks, but then we all learned how corporate PPAs might work, and government subsidies were obviously available at various times as well. So I think for the banks, it's how we get that familiarity and that level of comfort. But there's an enormous market pull for capital at the moment, just on food security and global supply chain concerns, and the issues raised by COVID this year won't go away ever again. I mean, they're with us forever now. So I think for a lot of markets now, there's some great opportunities for the banks to jump in. Marianne, do you want to come at the question a different way?
You're muted, so please unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was double muted. No, you covered it perfectly, Jim. But maybe I wanted to add something about the future of food and circularity in the food value chain. I really think it's related to the circularity also in other sectors. And you mentioned, Saskia, the packaging. I really think the way we design packaging and the distribution systems will impact the ability of the food system to become more circular, and single-use plastic packaging at the core of this question. I think we need to invest in new business models and new materials that enable us to keep all the benefits of plastic packaging. That's not the point, but enable us to make to have circularity, both in the containers we use, in the packaging we use, and in the food systems. And there are business models enabling this based on reusable packaging, for example, and that also makes a connection between innovative startups and large players in the food value chain, and creating these platforms at a sector or value chain scale. And we need to invest here also to make these platforms, logistic platforms, and distribution platforms which are offering circular solutions to make them available at the sector level. Your turn.
Yes, here I am. Sorry, my kids are coming into the house, so I have to reduce the background noise. I think the issue you raise around packaging is very interesting, and there are a lot of novel, innovative techniques coming out. I've seen examples of tomatoes being produced in the greenhouses, the tomato stems being used to produce the carton for the packaging, and then developing again bioplastics on it. So that the greenhouse itself produces not only the tomato, but also the packaging of the tomato. What interests me in this whole idea will be the balance between, and that's maybe also a link to Sasha and to Michael, is on one hand you would want to produce food, and we need to produce sufficient food to feed the world, and on the other hand we need to produce biomass to realize the demand for biomass for all kinds of other products like plastics that we need to package our food if we do no longer want to use our feet. Does any of you have any idea on the balance, what we should have or what will be the potential to produce enough food, which is a challenge in itself, but also to produce biomass for other purposes? And I think, Michael, you have made a living out of producing other products based on bio. Could you have a say?
Yeah, of course. I want to add also, like, our technology can also provide packaging. That's just like inside note there. But yeah, I think, like, to be honest, there's, in my knowledge, there's so much biomass available, so much food waste available, just like the apple pulp goes into 100,000s of tons in Europe, but not even more. And just also, like, to give the link to us again, to make a material out of it, we only need 5 kilograms to make a square meter. So you can imagine there's a lot still left for other applications or for other options. So the balance, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for me, like, in that sense, like, but of course we have to see what is the most urgent thing we have to do now. And that is, for me, also going away from plastic, single-use plastic. So we also should, of course, put a lot of focus on, when we go back to packaging, create something that can replace the single-use plastic. That's what I think is at the moment also key.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move towards one of the big demands for food, the big demanding areas, the role of the cities in designing such a circular food systems. Principle, or traditionally in cities we do not produce food, but we produce the food in the rural areas. But what's the role of the local governments in regulating in targeting maybe the untapped waste of the urban cities? Maybe Sasha, you could say something about that.
Thanks, Saskia. So indeed, cities are, let's put it like that, they're both consumers and regulators. And to a large extent, obviously, population is moving to the cities, and the huge cities like London, they are on consumption level similar to countries, and basically they can shape the environment. So cities can from our perspective, they can play a very important role. For example, by regulating what you're doing with your food waste and how you're sort of making an access to food waste easier to various players like us, for example, enabling easier collection, creating basically streams that are directed towards circular players and not landfills, for example. And a role as a regulator, as Jim mentioned, for example, the similar roles that regulator played in renewable energy. In photovoltaic, it was grid tariffs that kind of helped to close the gap. between grid parity and not mature technology. So cities have, I think, several roles here, as smart consumers, as educators, and as regulators, and they can shape this space tremendously.
Anybody who want to complete something on this question? I see Jim.
Well, I was just going to, I suppose, move away from sort of the regulation side and perhaps just talk a little bit more about the market pull side. And again, comes back to what we were saying earlier about COVID and food security. I think there's a lot of cities around the world now where consumers are thinking about their imports. And, you know, high value materials. You know, salmon is flown halfway around the world to make sushi and smoked salmon. We have tomatoes are flown halfway around the world, herbs as well. And all of these are crops now where there is proven technology that can do urban farming, whether it's salmon or shellfish, prawns, farmed onshore, whether it's greenhouse hydroponics for crops like tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, or indoor vertical farming for herbs and leafy greens. You know, this technology all exists. There are many technology vendors now, and I think there's a real trend in a lot of urban markets now for local growth and the production of these commodities close to the consumers. And whether it's the ultra low footprint ones like vertical farming, where you can stack in multiple heights and do things right in the city centre, or whether it's greenhouse hydroponic technology, where perhaps you're in the suburbs and you need maybe 10 hectares of land to build a farming operation, but still perhaps within 10 to 50 kilometres of the city centre. There's a lot of opportunity. We're seeing a lot of investment interest in those areas, and we're seeing a lot of customers who've realised that they are relying on global supply chain. As the guys were saying earlier, Mikhail was saying, do you want to eat your strawberries in winter, or should I be eating asparagus in November in the UK? No, probably I shouldn't be. And actually, the awareness now of these international supply chains, and actually that we can cut a lot of that out and grow locally, I think is only going to grow. And from an investor perspective, urban farming now is absolutely on the agenda in many markets, and food security concerns arising from COVID issues during 2020 is only going to increase that.
So basically what your statement is like, okay, the markets will deal with the demand for food and assure that we will get more locally produced food, and we don't need local government or like regulators to push it in the right direction, because it will happen through the market.
I wasn't perhaps going quite that far. I think the local regulators and that government influence is important, and as Sasha said, in some other areas in sustainability, it's been vitally important. So I think it's a combination of both. But I guess the point I was making, I think from consumer market pull alone, there is quite a big driver now to roll out a lot of urban farming in areas like vines and leafy greens and fish and shellfish.
Okay. And then, Michael, would you think that automatically we will stop willing to eat in the urban areas, willing to eat this strawberries in the wintertime, or in places where they cannot grow? Or do we need kind of adding a footprint or a transport footprint on the strawberries? How do we deal that in a free market? Work with that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the perfect world if we should just stop, right? If we would just stop to raise animals, and then we could feed 3.5 billion people more. Would be amazing. But yeah, I think a clear signal, like on the product, or like a clear symbol, would help the consumer understand: is this now environmentally friendly? Is it not? Is it good for me? Is it not? We can go, I don't know what it should be. If it should be a CO2, how much CO2 is really produced for it. So when you think about, like, it's an average number when you for produce 1 liter of milk, you have almost the same CO2 output as if you would burn 1 liter of fuel. And it's crazy for me. I don't think many people know that, and also that would change the perspective how I see things as a consumer. And what also would help, I think, for a mind shift, maybe again, it is education, the consumer education, but also when you go as the government, you go into schools and educate the kids, you know, that also will bring maybe that when you live in a city and by 2050, 70% of us will live in cities, you have to, again, connect the farmer, the actual food producer with the consumer. And I think there, when you educate kids, they will bring their parents to like, I want to eat more healthy. I want to see how my food is made. And you have to give people the option to actually visit these farms. And I think that would help a lot. Again, my perfect world, if it would be like that.
Okay, so what you're actually saying is also that there is a large role for education and showing good examples in a specific environment to see what are the opportunities to have this healthy food. Which links a little bit to some of the statements that Jim made, like in relation to biodiversity. You know, you have to show, you have to prove that it works, and then the rest will follow. Oh, this one is a nice question coming in. What is your opinion about open fridges on streets and inside buildings in cities in order to tackle food waste and hunger? How can we also get more people in cities to establish such projects? I don't know what they exactly mean with open fridges.
Maybe I can add something there. There's I think it's also here in Copenhagen, a program where for homeless people, you can, you know, when your food is, you have leftovers, you can just place them. There are fridges on the street and you can just place your food in there and everyone can take it for free. So it's a really lovely concept. I don't know how much you can scale it, but you know, approaches like these are just great.
Yeah,
it's a great initiative.
Comparative with the Too Good To Go ID. Where you could buy food to be thrown away cheaper through an app. Maybe Marion, do you have something to add?
I just wanted to add that some companies, such as I'm thinking of Olio in the UK, have been able to scale this idea of open fridge through an app, actually connecting consumers, neighbors through the app to exchange surplus foods, and they have now more than 2 million users. So the scale, they have been able to prove that you can scale this kind of solutions to reduce food waste at the consumer level.
Okay, wow, that's really interesting. You had something to add, Michael?
I just want to say that's great that I did that. I can only see like also like you have, I'm from Germany, and you have regulations that actually stopping doing this because it is food and it's highly regulated. So you're not allowed to, I'm not sure if it is this system, but for example, you're not allowed to take food waste or out from the street in that sense.
Yeah, and France already banned.
So also like the politics has to change there.
Okay, so we need new regulation to facilitate sharing food leftovers through initiatives like the open fridges. That would be kind of a conclusion. We have 10 more minutes left, but I wanted to ask you a question. Something that we also briefly discussed is there are many other industries which are already much more effective being circular. And maybe a question to ask to Michael again, what can we learn from, for instance, the fashion industry about circularity?
That's a tough question because it really depends on the brand. It's like, so there's like index called the Higg index, and that proves like for the whole supply chain how sustainable is the product that I'm actually using. So something like that, again, to have a symbol like how sustainable is how circular is the product I'm consuming, that would help a lot. But also in the fashion industry, you know, they feel they have to change, because there are also recent studies just shows when the bigger the corporate, the more they are pushed by the consumer to getting sustainable. And you have a lot of younger brands or smaller companies that are just seeing sustainability as part of their business model, or as keys to their business model. And I think there we also have to change the perspective again a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe I can add on this, Saskia.
Yeah.
I think indeed the fashion sector and the textile sector is another great example of a sector that struggles with waste and very like highly inefficient linear value chain, and as the current crisis really highlighted these existing problems across the value chain, and circular business models have showed that they are bringing resilience and in the sector, because they are an efficient alternative to highly complex international supply chain, which were very disrupted with this crisis, for example, and more leading players, huge multinationals, are now trying to implement or are starting to try to implement some circular business models, because that really creates, they understood already that that's creating economical and environmental value.
Okay, yes, thank you. So, and I think that really links to the next question we got from the audience, and that's the question is what well, starting from the principle circularity. Circularity means that you find something which you pass on to something else, or you create a higher value to it. So circular system is something that you never can do alone. You need to have your partners to realize such a circular system. And the question from the audience is like, what kind of platforms are available to find partnerships for circularity? Is there anybody who has some good examples of circular platforms?
I can give one or two examples. I mean, maybe not of a complete loop, but of points on that loop. I mean, I think in Europe, the anaerobic digestion market has become very well developed over the last 10 or 15 years, although there were some mistakes made with certain technologies, with certain waste streams. I think there's a lot of learning that's gone on. And of course, one of the reasons, Saskia, for your previous question about why other industries may be a bit ahead of food is, of course, in food we have a lot of wet waste, there's a lot of water. So that makes trucking and logistics costs much higher than it would be with other industry sectors where the waste streams are dry. So technologies like anaerobic digestion, which of course are set up to deal with wet waste, are very helpful. And I think, as I say, with 10, 15 years of learning in Europe, we now have a relatively mature industry. And I think one of the proof points of that is what gate fees people are willing to pay. I mean, we saw in the UK gate fees come down between 50 and 80% over a 3 to 5 year period because of the AD plants that were built, and people suddenly were looking for green waste in a way that back in 2000, 2005 they weren't. So actually it became a valuable commodity that people wanted in order to feed their AD plants, where operating 24/7, 365 is absolutely your target. You're looking for as high a level of availability as you can possibly achieve. So I think we've seen certain points on the whole circular chain now become much more mature and developed. And of course, the outputs from AD, I mean, although some of them are energy, potentially gas for grid injection or power generated on site. But of course, one of the outputs two of the outputs, in fact, are carbon dioxide and heat if you generate power. And of course, they can go straight back into a tomato greenhouse next door. or another agricultural project. So there's an example of closing the complete loop, feeding the tomatoes with the CO2 and the heat coming off a combined heat and power engine as an AD plant. So I think there are examples now where the food sector has managed to close the complete loop.
Yes, I agree. Sasha, yes?
Oh, just to add, it's not like I'm picking a fight with all the AD industry, but a couple of weeks ago, I think FERA published a paper basically stating that treatment with black soldier fly with insects, it's like 3 times more economic than AD. So I think it's kind of natural evolution. AD was a prevailing technology over the last, let's say, 15, 20 years. And currently we have solutions that are able to treat wet food waste in a better manner. So we're kind of, from one side, we're competing with them for resources. From other side, there are some streams that we cannot deal with and they can. So there is the idea of co-location, for example, and combining our forces. But this is definitely an evolution as it happens in solar energy and in other places where people tried various kind of halfway solutions and then it developed more and more. I'm not saying insects it's the last iteration of it, but it's definitely beating some other technologies, and it's the market forces basically will shape it. The more economic it is, the more money will flow in, etc., etc. So.
I would also say, Sasha, I think it also is a factor of the size of the waste stream. I mean, if you have 50,000 tons of green waste, I think you would naturally look at anaerobic digestion. But if it's 5,000 or 10,000 tons, that's too small to make an economic AD plant work. And I think those kind of scales, insect protein is a really, really smart thing to try at the smaller scales where an AD plant just won't make economic sense.
Okay, so we have just a couple of minutes more finished. Jawad says 1 minute. I would like to end with all of you making a brief statement. So we have had this 2 days of Sustainable Foods Conference. What will be your next step after this conference to make the food system more circular? Anybody willing to give it a start? You need some thinking. Then I start. Marion, could you tell me about your next steps, your plans?
Yeah, I think raise more money to invest in all the opportunities and the solutions we just highlighted.
Okay, Jim?
I'll just pick one example. I think sustainable fertilizer is one of the most exciting areas, a massive market demand. How we deliver nitrogen, phosphate, potash to the fields cannot continue in the way it has done in the 20th century. I think as an investor, that is probably the most exciting area of all at the moment.
Okay, great. Sasha?
Well, very simple. Every day coming into the office, me and my team promoting food circularity in a very direct way. Every success we're having here in our lab, every 0.5% of FCR we're gaining in lab, and tomorrow in the facilities. It's bring us closer and closer to economic viability of food circularity.
Thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, the same for us. So I think we just keep pushing boundaries and keep showing people that waste can be beautiful.
Okay, I think that's a real nice sentence to close up. Waste can be beautiful. Thank you very much for participating, bringing your knowledge, bringing your ideas to this session, and thank you very much for the discussion. I hope the audience also liked it, but I truly enjoyed talking to you, having the discussion, and I'm very much looking forward to also meet all of you after this session, because all of the things that you have said really relates very much to my daily work on developing knowledge to facilitate this circular, climate neutral society. So thank you, and I assume, Jawad, we are supposed to close the session